Hey, welcome everybody tonight's live. I'm Dr. Tammy, and I'm so glad you're here. And we are going to have at least this is not a topic that's fun, but I think it's very important, and I hope that you'll find it very informative. Tonight, we are talking about dysfunctional uterine bleeding, and that means if you have struggled with heavy bleeding, irregular bleeding, if you've ever had any conditions like endometriosis, PCOS, PMDD, which is premenstrual disorder, anything like that, I think it's very important that you be on this. And if you have a minute and you want to take and share this with someone who you think could benefit from this, I promise you that you will have some answers tonight. And I promise you that you will have a whole new understanding. And I think I really kind of freak people out sometimes because the things I say are so different, right? It's not what you're going to hear from the medical establishment. And it's certainly not something you're going to hear from a doctor who spends less than 5 minutes with you with their hand on the door. So if you stay till the end, I'm going to share with you 2 of my most embarrassing moments. And, it's hard for me to do that. So if you can really just stay with me, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm going to do it. But I think it's very relevant to what we're talking about tonight. And so, so if you want to stay till the end, I'm here a whole hour and I love to be here. And I want you guys to ask questions because that's how I know what you need, because otherwise I just talk, and I can talk forever, but I really need to know what you guys need. And if you're on live stream on Instagram or Facebook, the only place I can really see your comments are on TikTok. So if you will join me on TikTok and find me, please do. And your questions and your comments really kind of fuel the conversation because this is about you. This isn't about me. I've been a medical doctor who specialized in hormones going on almost 25 years now. So yeah, it's crazy what I've seen, the patients that I've seen, the suffering that I've seen, and you don't have to suffer. This stuff is so easy to fix. It is so easy to fix. So I just, I hope that this is very enlightening for you. So if you would put in the comments the biggest challenge that you've had with uterine bleeding, irregular periods, I don't want you to reveal any medical information, but what's the most bothersome thing to you, or endometriosis, PCOS? If you put that in the comments, so I know what to address and what I want to make sure that I cover for you guys. So if you came here with a specific purpose, I want to make sure that I cover that tonight. So as we're talking about things, I'm going to have to draw some pictures because everyone who knows me knows that I'm a picture drawer. Is that a word? Because I really I'm a visual learner. Are you guys a visual learner? Put in the chat if you're a visual learner. I want to know who all is kind of like me if you like to see pictures. Could you please explain to me why I have to push the year out? Push the year, I'm not sure. Not sure. I'm not sure what that means. Okay. So anyway, I try to make sense of some of the comments, and I know sometimes I'm not always hearing the way I'm supposed to hear it, but okay. And sometimes I'm a little bit dense with stuff. It's just I'm just so naive with stuff. So sometimes people are saying really creepy stuff and I don't know, but my moderator is my fiance and he's absolutely fabulous. And he monitors everything. So that's wonderful. And if you tap the screen and it sends those little hearts up, it lets me know that the content is good and that you like it. And it also tells the algorithm to talk to the people out there and send the people who need to hear this. So without further ado, it is 7:05, and that's usually when I start, just to give people a chance to all be on here. So again, if you missed the beginning, I'm a medical doctor and I specialize in hormones, specifically post-menopause therapy. And the first thing that I want to say is that menopause is not the issue here. So I always preach that for the first few minutes. Menopause is just 1 year without periods. The problem is that when you stop having periods, the reason, and we always want the underlying reason, the reason you stop having periods is because your ovaries have literally died. We call it ovarian failure. So please use that correct terminology when you are talking about what happens after menopause. And it can be crippling for many women, and it doesn't have to be that way. And we need to change the narrative. Now, I want to expand this just a little bit. I try to keep my focus to what happens with ovarian failure, which is after menopause, but perimenopause can be very problematic, very crippling for some people. We're doing the 25 symptoms of menopause this month, which is kind of like the Advent, and we're counting. I can't believe we're so close to Christmas now. So we're like halfway through. And everybody thinks hot flashes when they think menopause, but that is one on the low end of the list. So tonight we're talking about irregular bleeding, and that absolutely can be something that happens with menopause. And I'm going to explain all about what cycles look like. But first of all, I just want to say that there's a couple things. One is that we often don't have conversations, and I think it's growing when we have platforms like TikTok and things like that, but we don't with our daughters. It's so sad that all of this, and I think that's why we have problems. The conversations are so steeped in shame because it's attached to our sexuality and things like that, but it is not. This is a physiological thing that happens, having menstrual cycles, going through all the things, having babies, perimenopause, menopause, all the things. So it is a physiological thing. And so we really have to start having a conversation. And I remember my mom, oh my gosh, I'm going to be totally transparent. Some of this stuff is really embarrassing, but I'm going to have my most embarrassing moments I'm going to tell you about at the end if you stay with me. Yes, no one has a conversation with me about this. Yes, it's a real problem. Tell me if you've had a problem with people having conversations with you. But yeah, I remember I started my menstrual cycle. It was a little bit late. And I remember my mom, like I went to her and I knew what it was because they kind of had that talk at school where they give you this little book and talk about flowers and stuff like that. And I knew kind of what it was. And I remember I went and told my mom, okay, this is it. What do I do? My gosh, she had no idea what to say to me, and we weren't prepared. And she goes to the bathroom and she comes out with a box of Super Plus tampons. I had no idea what to do. I'm like reading the directions in the bathroom. I'm just like, oh my gosh, this is the worst thing that's ever happened to me. It was scary. And there was no conversation at all. And so, like, it's nuts that we don't talk about these things. And one of the problems with this is because girls do not know what dysfunctional uterine bleeding really is. And the problem with that is almost all girls have problems with dysfunctional uterine bleeding because they don't know when it's too much because nobody's talking about it. Okay. So this is crazy. The mammalian model, and mammals have live births. So that's what this is all for. And I'll explain that in a little bit in some nerdy science. The mammal model is that menstrual cycles are 3 days of light spotting. And if you've ever had a dog or a pet or a cat, usually you don't know that that pet is having a menstrual cycle. And that's the way we're supposed to be. I mean, our dogs and cats don't walk around with, Super Plus tampons. So that's the way it's supposed to be. So our daughters, when they start having problems, we don't really even know how to have the conversation because no one had the conversation with us. And we have normalized in the store the feminine products that are Super Plus tampons. We've normalized that, and it's not supposed to be that way. So why has it happened? One of the things is that our food supply has changed. We have a lot of hormones in our food supply, and we have lots of things that act like hormones in our food supply, like xenoestrogens. They're like pesticides and stuff. They are chemicals that are similar to estrogens. And then also we have things called endocrine disruptors, and they are in things like plastic water bottles and the chemicals in some of our food. And so we have chemicals in our food that are banned in other countries. So there is an issue with that. And we are seeing, problems with people's weight gain. It's just interesting. The weight loss shots, the GLP-1s, they are kind of like meant to match the endocrine disruptors that are in our food supply. So it's like almost nobody can lose weight unless, number one, their hormones are balanced, right? But if not, then everybody's using these weight loss shots, and that's actually a hormone. So that's part of what's going on is our hormone disruption. Do you take DIM? Are you talking about DIM, like the estrone blocker? I'm not sure. DIM, because usually that's spelled DIM. So you can let me know if I'm miscorrect on that. But actually, if she is, she's regarding hormones. Read that. I'm not familiar with how to. No, if that's a supplement. I know there are a lot of supplements that can help as well. So yeah, can be. Okay, so yeah, if you have any questions, my moderator said, direct message me and I'll find out, because I know everything. I can't know everything, but for my patients and for people who reach out with information, I will research it. And I'm such a nerdy researcher that I will find whatever answers that you want. So, okay, so I'm going to go into nerdy science mode and I'm going to draw some pictures, but I have to mirror my video. Okay, I think we're okay. So I'm going to test this just a minute and I'm going to see if this actually isn't. Let's see, does that look okay? It's awfully light, so I'm going to darken that up a little bit. Okay, I think, can somebody comment and tell me if you can see that? Is that backwards? I'm going to write the word hormones here. Maybe that will help. I'm going to pull this over just a little bit. I don't do a whole lot of writing. It's backwards. Okay, let me switch it. Okay, let's see if that helps. Okay, it's not backwards anymore. Okay, yeah, it's like I couldn't really tell. Okay, thank you. It's not backwards anymore. Okay, and somebody asked me about bloating. Can you pull that back? Ask me. No, it's good. Thank you. Ask me that question about bloating later. We actually talked about bloating last night, and I try to repost my lives, but I haven't posted last night's yet. So it's all about bloating, causing a bloating and indigestion. One of the main things is hormone imbalance. So everything ties in here. Every night you guys are here. I'm here every night at 7. I'm always talking about hormones. And one of the biggest things is when progesterone drops out, because progesterone helps regulate your digestion. So I'm going to draw a little bit and kind of explain a little bit about what a menstrual cycle is and what's happening. Okay, so I'm going to use red. That's appropriate, isn't it? And I'm going to say that this is hormones here. Okay, before I do that though, I'm going to put, these are days. And this is 28 days, so this is a menstrual cycle. And day 14 is ovulation. And what ovulation means, ova means egg, and every month you pop out an egg. And if that egg gets fertilized, then there's a pregnancy. And if it doesn't, you slough the lining of your uterus and you have a menstrual cycle, or you have a period at that point. Okay, so why is this important? Okay, this is important because the first part of your cycle is driven by the hormone estrogen. Okay, and the second part of your cycle is driven by the hormone progesterone. So they are the yin to the yang of each other. So everybody's heard of estrogen, right? Everybody thinks it causes cancer, and that's a whole nother conversation. But estrogen is very important to build up the lining of the uterus so that if the egg gets fertilized, that's kind of like a little bloody blanket, as gross as that sounds. That's what how the baby gets its food supply. That's how the baby grows. Okay. So estrogen, this first part of the cycle, basically starts climbing right here, and it needs something down. It needs something to balance it. So what happens is when the egg pops out, the ovaries send a signal to the brain, the pituitary gland, and a hormone is then released that tells progesterone to come and tell estrogen to calm the freak down, right? I mean, just stop it. So progesterone comes in, and we're going to do progesterone as, let's do it as green. So I'm going to write out the word progesterone. Now, I know this is a lot of nerdy science, so please bear with me because I promise this will make sense in just a minute. So progesterone is then released a lot higher. Now, they're both kind of balancing each other out, but progesterone comes in about here and grabs onto estrogen and pulls estrogen down. So I'm going to do that in red, and pulls estrogen down. And so progesterone has started to peak about right here. So it grabs onto it before the estrogen goes too far. It peaks, and then it pulls that down. So estrogen and progesterone, then wax and wane, and then you start all over again, okay? So what is you're building up a uterine lining here, and then you slough that uterine lining, okay? So if progesterone doesn't get released to do its job, estrogen keeps climbing, keeps climbing, keeps climbing. If estrogen, that's kind of an exaggerated view, but it feels very exaggerated. If estrogen keeps climbing like that, your uterine lining keeps climbing like that. And if you can only imagine that the blood in the uterine lining is building up like that, when it comes time to have a period, then it's going to be very, very, very heavy. And I think of it like, those buckets at the water when they fill up, and they sort of just fill a little, and then it just sprinkles a little water on the kids and family. But if that bucket fills up too much, literally when it dumps, it's going to pelt everybody down below, and it's going to be painful, right? Because water hits you too hard. That's a bad thing. So if you build up too much of this uterine lining, then when it actually comes time for it to spill out, or even if you don't have enough progesterone for it to, like, it just keeps building up, it's going to spill out, then that's when you're going to have the heavy, heavy periods, okay? So we call this estrogen dominance. So I'm going to write that here just so you can kind of remember. And estrogen dominance is a problem because this is why the mammal model is supposed to be 3 days of, but we have way too much estrogen, and it causes way too many problems. So I do want to say that this right here, when all this estrogen is building up, this is when you have your PMS. And so whenever you have estrogen dominance, it's like having PMS all the time. So I'm going to answer a question real quick. I've been in bed mostly for months, sweating and explosive emotions. That's estrogen dominance. So I just had a patient the other day who told me that, we're having a little trouble getting her balanced. She was feeling much better, but the balance wasn't there. So we rechecked her hormones, and her estrogen was still very high. If you really like the nerdy science of this, there is something called the Omni calculator, and it will calculate based on your estrogen and progesterone levels if you're estrogen dominant. And so what we found with her was when we brought her progesterone up to match her estrogen dominance went away, and she felt great. So that's what has to happen when too much estrogen. A lot of times, if you can just get the cycle back into a natural rhythm, then this will calm down. But one of the treatments, or the main treatment that I do with a menstruating female, is to actually use natural progesterone during the middle part of the cycle. So we're actually giving progesterone right here to say, hey, calm down and pull that. So we use progesterone during the middle part of the cycle to keep this estrogen at bay and to keep the lining from building up. So I know this is just kind of all of a hot mess, but I hope you understand that it's sort of like that yin to yang thing. Estrogen and progesterone, that looks kind of silly, doesn't it? Estrogen to progesterone balance each other out. So they're very important. Yes, Omni calculator. So one of the things that happens with menopause and perimenopause is that as you start to run out of eggs, you become very estrogen dominant because your ovaries are literally trying to spit out every bit of estrogen that it can. And if you've been estrogen dominant your whole life, if you've had endometriosis is just a building up of this lining. PCOS is a progesterone deficiency. So what do I mean by that? If you're progesterone deficient, you're going to be estrogen dominant. So every female dysfunctional uterine problem is estrogen dominance. Every time. There's no exception. And the problem is, if you're bleeding a lot and they do a hysterectomy, that does not fix the hormone problem. That only fixes the bleeding. And if they leave you an ovary or two, that's good, but it didn't fix the hormone problem. So that's not good. So they've just given you this false belief that everything's going to be okay. So, yeah, you're not bleeding anymore. But what about the headaches? What about the weight gain? What about the bloating? What about all the things? Okay, so this is a good point. I'm glad you brought that up. She says, my doctor birth control. This is one of my biggest frustrations because what birth control is it's a synthetic estrogen or estrogen and progesterone or only, but it's synthetic and it's very high dose. And the intention is to keep you from getting pregnant. Basically, what it does is it flatlines all of that. It's so much that it tells the brain to stop making those hormones. It's kind of like if you give someone too much thyroid, it will tell the brain that you have plenty and your thyroid function will shut down. In men, if you give them too much testosterone, it will shut down their testicular function. So that's why you should never give somebody something. But the whole point of synthetic birth control is to shut it off so you can't get pregnant. And the difference between a synthetic hormone and a natural hormone, excessive weight on the body also causes with estrogen dominance. Yes, absolutely. And I'll explain that in just a minute too. I had an endometrial ablation surgery. Okay. So let me finish birth control real quick. And if I forget those questions, come back around and ask those. But if you suppress everything, you're going to suppress the testosterone. So you're going to the sex drive, and you're basically going to put somebody into menopause. That's what birth control does. And that's why you don't get the acne because you don't have any testosterone anymore. But oftentimes you don't have a lot of energy. And so then you run into all sorts of problems. Also, synthetic birth control and really high dose, synthetic and organic are different. So that's great, Justina. Thank you. It's perfect time to bring that in. So bioidentical hormones are the same molecular structure as your body. And I always say it's the difference between a strawberry and a strawberry candy. And anybody who follows me every night, you guys know this. And so a strawberry candy, your body doesn't know what to do with that high fructose corn syrup lump, right? And that can actually cause diabetes, right? A strawberry, your body recognizes that. It knows how to metabolize it. It knows how to pull nutrients out of it. So a bioidentical organic-based hormone is very different from synthetic. So, the craziest thing, estrogen dominance is a marketing term, not a medical term. I try to be really open-minded, so you're going to have to tell me why you say that. So if you'll come back around with your comment and tell me why you say that, because that's not my understanding, but I'm always open to learning. So yes, please share. Okay. So when you use high dose synthetic hormones, it can cause cancer. So whenever I say this whole conversation about hormones causing cancer, I'm always talking about the difference between organic and synthetic. Okay. So if you give someone a high dose of anything synthetic in their body, we have no idea what that's going to do. And here's the problem. After menopause, when you've gone into ovarian failure, and 100% of women will experience ovarian failure, doctors will tell them, I'm not going to give you any hormones because that causes cancer. That is nuts. That is absolutely nuts. Because if your thyroid was gone or you had your thyroid removed, they would never say, hormones cause cancer. I'm not going to give you any thyroid hormone because hormones cause cancer. I mean, it's just you can't say those blanket statements like hormones cause cancer. Okay, which hormone? And if you're going to say estrogen, which estrogen? So there are different kinds of estrogen. Guess you've not read medical tests about estrogen dominance. I have to share the research on that. So I'm open to Oh, she's answering the other guy. Yeah, exactly. Okay, so when we're talking about synthetic everything down, now the problem to me is that after menopause, when you're an ovarian, they tell you that hormones are going to cause cancer. First, you have to say which hormone, then you have to say estrogen, then you have to say which estrogen, and then you have to say, tell me why. And so that's conversation for another. Yes, I absolutely suggest requesting testing. Absolutely. So we'll talk about that in just a little bit too. Okay. So testing is, well, kind of answer that a little bit. Testing is different during perimenopause than it is in ovarian failure after menopause. So you, during this part of the cycle, will have different estrogen levels than you'll have in this part of the cycle. So it's important to know when a woman's still having periods, where she's at in her cycle. I've done this long enough that I don't even really make them do a particular time. So I look at this and I say, yeah, I don't really care when you test. The problem is that if you're dominant, it doesn't really matter because you'll be estrogen dominant here, you'll be estrogen dominant here. If estrogen is running the show, then it doesn't matter when you check because that Omni calculator I mentioned will tell you where the problem lies. Okay. And in ovarian failure after menopause, if you give a woman synthetic estrogen, that's the worst thing that you can do because you will create PMS for her every day of her life and she'll feel miserable and she'll say terrible on that. And then that gives somebody the opportunity to say, see, hormones don't work. And I always say, if your hormones aren't working, it's either synthetic or it's not the right balance because everybody is different. Obesity, excessive weight gain, and estrogen dominance. Okay, yeah, absolutely. So we'll kind of skip into that a little bit. I'm just trying to kind of time things with you because I can get nerding out on this whole lot. So weight gain and estrogen dominance. So I just said that it's important that you understand that there are different kinds of estrogen. So estrogen mostly helps grow things, right? That's the point. And so during a woman's menstruating years, what happens is estrogen is keeping your skin, oh, you're so welcome, keeping your skin healthy, it's keeping your bones healthy, it's keeping your heart healthy. And then when you're in ovarian failure after menopause, none of that is healthy anymore. So estrogen runs the shot. The problem is too much estrogen. So the reason I'm saying the different kinds of estrogen are some estrogens are really good at growing things. So if you're a 9-year-old girl trying to grow breast, that kind of estrogen is a good estrogen to have in abundance. If you're a postmenopausal female in ovarian failure, then that estrogen is not so good because you've got breast tissue. You don't need to grow more. And more growth in the breast, where those estrogen can trigger tumor growth and then cancer growth. So you want to be very aware of what you're doing and how you're doing it. Now, topical natural organic hormones, don't do that because you're keeping the balance. And here's the reason I say that. Because the 3 different kinds of hormones, let's see, I'm going to do this up here so you can see it. We call them E1, E2, and E3. And there won't be a I promise, but this is important. Okay. So E1 is the problem child. Okay. And it is called estrone. You don't have to know that. And E3 is the protective hormone. And we just abbreviate that. And compounding pharmacies know what it means. And so E2 is the estradiol. And so this is what you'll see when you see some identical hormone therapy prescription. And estradiol is the neutral one, okay? And so this is really important to know if you've had breast cancer or you have a risk of breast cancer, because this guy, you don't want him around. Okay, and here's the problem. E2 and E3. E3 is what we call the protective one. And it will actually bind up the receptors of estrone, keep it from functioning in tumor growth. So this is every woman at high risk for breast cancer or who have had breast cancer should know this. And if you watch one of my videos the other night, a lady, a patient of mine, who went to a breast cancer oncologist. And this person has studied for years and years and years, residency, internships, studied for years and years. And they should know this. And the chemotherapy agents, they work according to this. And there's actually 25 metabolites of estrogen, and some of them are more associated with E1. And this doctor, when she said, because she goes for an MRI every year, and he does a follow-up, right, and talks about the MRI and tells her it's okay. He saw that she was on bioidentical compounded hormones and said, oh my gosh, you have to go off of those. And he like didn't even know what it was. He's like, E2, E3 thing. And she's like, oh, that's my compounded bioidenticals. And he's like, oh, you have to go off all your hormones. Well, first of all, it's estrogen that's the potential concern. And it's not progesterone, it's not testosterone, which is so important that you know that, because if you don't listen to me and you're still scared of hormones, you should at least be being offered testosterone for your muscle and for your heart and for your libido and for your brain fog. I mean, it's just nuts. You're an ovarian failure. You don't have any of those hormones anymore. So you should be at least offered that. So anyway, kind of back to this. E1 also works in conjunction with balancing out cortisol. So you asked about the weight gain around the middle. And so when you have a lot of estrone, that accumulates in the belly fat. Okay, so that visceral fat is the dangerous fat that can actually cause heart attack, kidney disease, all the bad things. And women tell me all the time after menopause and ovarian failure, they tell me that they can't get rid of the belly fat no matter what they do. And they've never had it before, and they haven't changed their habits. They're not eating any different. They're eating the same, but now they have belly, and it just seems like it's loose and it's bloated. And so all of that is hormonal. So you have to understand very different. And when a doctor just gives you synthetic hormones and or slaps a synthetic patch, estrogen patch on you without the progesterone to balance it out, I see women gain 5 to 15 pounds a year. And it is just terrible when I have a woman who's 5 years out from menopause and she's 60 pounds. I mean, it is so hard to get the hormones balanced back and then move the needle in the other direction. So I tell women, once we get you on hormones, I can stop the needle. We'll have to do more work to change that. Well, what I've coined the term hormone resistant weight loss, we'll have to, do some more aggressive things to move that needle, but we can stop the weight gain. So do it now. Do it now before it's completely out of control. Okay, this is a great time to kind of transition over here, and you guys can throw some more questions up if you want. This is a great time to transition into the thought. Oh, thank you for the hearts and the flowers. I love you guys. If you would tap the screen, if this is good content, please let me know if I'm on the right track with you guys, if you're learning new stuff. I love, love, love. The word doctor in Latin actually means to teach. So I love, love, love sharing information. I was given IUD to stop heavy bleeding. I didn't see that whole comment. IUDs are a little bit different conversation. There are two different kinds of IUDs. There's an IUD that is just copper. And if you guys aren't familiar with what an IUD is, let's kind of explain that in just a minute. Okay, so here are the ovaries, and the ovaries have the fallopian tubes, and then here's the uterus, and here's the cervix, or the opening into the vaginal canal. And so what they do is they come in here and they take something that looks like a plastic stick, and they insert it up here, and then they insert it like this. And once you get it up in there, they pull this little sleeve off, and it sprouts out like that. Not quite like that. I mean, you hopefully doesn't stick into the uterine wall. That's what it does. You have to have an ultrasound and have it removed. But anyway, normally there's just a little string here that hangs out, and then if you want it removed, you can just pull the string out. But there are two different kinds of IUDs. Oh, good. I'm glad you're learning. I love this. There are two different kinds of IUDs. There's one that secretes synthetic progesterone. Now, the difference between synthetic progesterone and natural or organic progesterone is the difference between the chemical causing the baby to not implant or to kill a baby, basically. An organic natural progesterone, you can actually give a woman to promote a pregnancy, progestation, progesterone. And I have a natural fertility program. So, and I've had women who've gotten pregnant after in vitro fertilization, after they have tried for years and years. And all I do is a couple of things, but one of the main things I do is cycle progesterone, organic natural progestation during the mid part of the cycle. And then I make sure I leave them on it so they can maintain the pregnancy until they're at least in their third trimester and the uterus is making its own progesterone. But this actually usually secretes a synthetic progesterone. And why do they do that? To do that, but they do it so that it shuts down all of the hormonal function in the ovaries nearby so that you can't get pregnant. But a lot of times they'll do it to stop the bleeding. So it works like a synthetic birth control. So yeah, it does. It stops the bleeding, but it's not fixing any of the problems, right? So I tell women, if you don't want to get pregnant and you don't want to go on synthetic hormones, which is so nuts to me because doctors out there, this is clown world, they'll put a 9-year-old girl on high dose synthetic hormones. But then once we're in ovarian failure after menopause, they tell us it's dangerous. That's clown world. That's absolutely insane. So anyway, back to here. I tell women if they don't want to get pregnant, tell your gynecologist that you want the copper one, and they will put the medicated one with the synthetic progesterone in it. Why? Because pharmaceutical companies can make a whole lot more money by the sophistication of the secretion of the synthetic hormone. And you're argue with you and they'll say, well, why do you want that one when you can have the one that secretes the hormone, right? But wait a minute, I thought hormones cause cancer. So, don't go arguing with your GYN. Just say, I've done my research and this is if you want an IUD. I've done my research and I want just the copper only. Creates a little irritation in there so that a egg can't implant or get fertilized, right? So, and that's a great option, especially if a woman's having a lot of hormonal problems and I want to use natural organic progesterone. And this actually increases fertility. So this is why my fertility program is so amazing and it's all natural. So I tell women, if we're going to work with your estrogen dominance and give you natural progesterone and you're still menstruating, we will slow your periods down to 3 days of light bleeding, but you'll be fertile. So a copper IUD might be a good solution for that. With my OB/GYN. Yep, that's who we'll put that in. I'll also tell you a little hint that if you do go get the copper IUD, and they're being marketed to by these, reps who are like pushing, you got to do this, you got to do this. And they don't have enough time to stop and think. Doctors aren't trained in all this stuff. Yes, I'll actually do it. I'll do endometriosis. Absolutely. I kind of started that a minute ago, but I will. So they're pushing all this stuff that they can charge insurance for and make a lot of money. So the synthetic progesterone for sure. And the reason that the synthetic progesterone often causes women is because it throws the balance of everything off. And now we upregulate our E1. So again, I'll kind of go back to E1. E1 is the problem, and it's the problem in endometriosis. And E1 is the one that is stored fat. And so we carry an enzyme. Enzyme's just a conversion chemical that tells one hormone to turn into another one. So these basically other just by a chemical messenger. And so we store more of this estrone, the problem one, in our belly fat. And the stats show that for every size over ideal that a woman is, your risk of cancer goes up by 33%. So if you're 2 pant sizes over where you should be after menopause, that is drastically increasing your risk of uterine and breast cancer. I'll also say the reason that doctors tell you that you don't need progesterone if you've had a hysterectomy is because if you don't have a uterus, you can't get uterine cancer. And remember, it's estrogen that's causing you to build up the lining. So you don't need progesterone to calm estrogen down because you can't get uterine cancer, right? What about your breasts? They're still there. That makes no sense. And that's like saying for symptoms, progesterone helps with sleep, progesterone balances mood, it helps with inflammation. So that's like saying you have shoes, you don't need socks if a doctor tells you that all you need is estrogen. Okay, so the question about endometriosis, make sure I address that, is estrogen dominance and you're building up too much lining. And any place that increased growth, we call that proliferation, any place that increased growth happens, anywhere in the breast, in the uterus, anywhere in the endothelial lining and the arteries, it can cause inflammation. So again, all estrogens are not created equal. This one is protective, this one is neutral, and this one is very proliferative or growth inducing. And so if you have a lot of this E1, you start to get belly fat, you're storing too much estrogen, now you're just pumping out E1 all the time. Proliferation can either be in the breast, but it can also be in the uterus. And so what happens is when you have this uterine dominance, this estrogen dominance all the time, and you're building up, oh, I better do that in red, and you're building up this uterine lining, and then you build up more, you build up more, you build up more, you build up more, and now this is all just, and all blood is what causes a dysfunctional uterine bleeding. Now what happens is it just proliferates so much and the messaging gets really, really screwed up. And now you start making tumors in here. And these are fibroids. And fibroids come from estrogen dominance. But what happens is if there is so much proliferation that's happening in the arteries, the uterine arteries around this area, now you start growing endometrial, meaning the lining of the uterus. Basically, you're growing uterine lining out here. And when that happens, this gets inflamed and it's like having PMS or it's like having a period in what we call your peritoneal cavity or your in your pelvis. And so you just start growing this endometrial tissue. And this is crazy because there's an embryonic, meaning sort of born with component. And there is actually in the literature evidence of women growing endometrial tissue because as you're forming as an embryo, as a baby, you form these tissues in all sorts of different places. And some people just have endometrial tissue out there. It's not because this is your, this has a thin lining, but some people just grow tissue out there. But some women will actually grow endometrial tissue in their nose. And when they have a menstrual cycle, they'll get nosebleeds. And we treat that with progesterone cream in the nose. So, I mean, it's crazy what can happen to the human body. I am just blown away by the miracle of our bodies. And I'm just blown away that more things don't go wrong all the time. And when we induce things in our environment or in environment, like all these chemicals, that's why we're having the problems that we never had before. And it really started when I was a kid because I'm 55. And so endometriosis, PCOS, I experienced every single thing. I had fertility issues. And I will tell you that the sugar craze was just happening. If you look at people back in the 50s, they weren't overweight like we are now. But when I was a kid, and my mom didn't know any better because it was delicious, right? But she was fixing me Captain Crunch and Pebbles every morning for breakfast. And her favorite thing that she liked to eat, which I would eat too, was honey buns and a Coke. That was like every single morning. And I'm just so disgusted by that now. Just I haven't drank a soda in I don't know, at least 10 years. I don't even know how long. So, I mean, just all that sugar, just drinking all that sugar is just so gross. The other impact, we'll just kind of make that connection for a minute because we're just a whole body, a whole hormonal connection. That sugar we were never meant to have. I did a research study one time on the sugar that's in our environment. And what is in the literature is that if you've ever seen those pink bags of these used to be called CNH, um, we used to consume back in the 60s about two of bags a year, and that was the average. Now we consume almost 100 bags of sugar a year. And if you drink a soda, this is my tea. I love my tea. You guys know I love my tea. If you drink a soda, About half of that is straight sugar and half of that's water. If you've ever made Kool-Aid, you know how much you put into a quart of Kool-Aid. It is absolutely nuts how much sugar. Okay, so why am I saying that? Because sugar stimulates the hormone insulin and then can cause your insulin to not work well. Insulin and thyroid interact with each other. So your thyroid goes out, your metabolism goes out. But and estrogen interact with each other. So it's all did. So you have all this sugar, and then your cortisol is trying to, your glucocorticoids or your cortisol is trying to regulate your sugar. And so now you're getting belly fat, you're storing more estrone. I don't know. It's like, I could just like circle back a million times because they really are all connected. And I like the analogy of the orchestra because we're like a bunch of little instruments in there. And if the drummer's playing too loud, it's a mess. If is playing out of tune, it's a mess. So you really want to keep consistency. Now, one of the things that I didn't touch on is that we talked about when estrogen is going nuts here and you don't have progesterone to balance this out. But one of the problems is if you have more than 3 cycles of this dysregulation, that's when you start getting irregular timing. So we talked about heavy bleeding, estrogen dominance, endometriosis. We'll touch on PCOS. Put in the comments if you want me to talk about PCOS, and I'll touch on that too. But what happens is this is 28 days for the most part. But if you have estrogen dominance going on all the time and it's not being balanced out with the progesterone, then when the progesterone kicks in here, maybe progesterone hits here instead of here where it was supposed to. Now your whole cycle is thrown off because then all of this, uterus, ovaries, all of that is then telling, if I drew a person up here, let's see if you probably can't see that. If this is a person and this is their body, and these are the ovaries are talking to the brain and the brain's talking to the ovaries. And so that messaging that's happening, it gets confused. And now later in the month, your progesterone's here trying to pull things down, but that's throwing the timing off. So when your period starts, it's going to be on a different day. So if we drew out, I don't know if you can see this, but if we drew out 3 months, you can see that if we mark off those, that now the start and stop and the amount of days is going to get thrown off. Okay. Oh, more questions, you guys. Yeah, because we're getting the end of the hour. So if you have questions, please let's address them. My son is 18 months and I still haven't had a period. I think stress is a factor. If you don't care sharing, or you don't have to answer this, but breastfeeding can be a factor because what happens in breastfeeding is you have a hormone called oxytocin that gets stimulated, and then progesterone is also it drops off a little bit, which is why some women get postpartum depression, which is progesterone. And that is, oh my gosh, talk about get me all up. And I get so stressed because postpartum is a progesterone deficiency because progesterone is progestation. It's promoting that pregnancy. The mom has the baby, and now she doesn't have any progesterone anymore. And progesterone is a mood regulator. All she needs is progesterone. Preeclampsia, which is a basically a hormone imbalance, which is high blood pressure, is a hormone dysregulation that's happening during the pregnancy. And after the pregnancy, okay, so this is funny, and I hope my friend is not on tonight, but she's a pharmacist and she's one, and she had a baby not too long ago. Let's see, low estrogen, high cholesterol. We have to talk about cholesterol. Oh, that's wonderful, Mallory. Oh my gosh. Okay, I get super passionate about that. But anyway, she had a baby and her blood pressure was still running high. Now you have to remember that progesterone drops off, progestation, after the baby, and progesterone is a blood pressure regulator, which is why women's estrogen goes down after the progesterone crashes. But that's why she'll get high blood pressure after the pregnancy or even after menopause. I call that ovarian failure because that's what it is. But that's why the blood pressure goes up, because of the dysregulation. So I reached out to her. She's a compounding pharmacist. She does this every day. She compounds hormones every day. So talk about forest for the trees. And I said, are you on some progesterone? And she was like, oh my gosh, because they had her like on all these medications and stuff. So yeah, so it was like, oh wow, let's go back to science. Let's ask why. But we get scared, right? Because we trust our doctors. They just throw big pharma at us. And it's crazy to me because people don't know this blood pressure medicines. Absolutely not. That has to be regulated. But when I was doing my OB obstetrics residency and we were delivering babies, we didn't put the moms on blood pressure medicine when they got preeclampsia or high blood pressure. We put them on magnesium because magnesium is a relaxer and it will bring your blood pressure down. It is nuts. So, if you're struggling with blood pressure, explore magnesium because it's all natural, it's dirt cheap. And of course, Big Pharma doesn't want you to know about that because they can't make money off of it, right? Because it's cheap. So, anyway, you get too much magnesium, you can get some diarrhea. So, you do have to watch that a little bit, but because it's a smooth muscle relaxer in the so if you have constipation, magnesium is wonderful for that. So I know I'm getting at the end. So Mallory, I want to make sure I address this. So I want to draw another picture. So I'm going to do a whole new sheet here. Okay, this is nuts. You are not going to believe this. This is crazy. And the first time I ever heard this, like, you've got to be kidding me. Okay. Oh, and I promised if you'd stay to the end, I would tell you my two most embarrassing moments of my life. So I was hoping everybody would leave so I wouldn't have to. Just kidding. I'm totally going to. Okay. Have you ever heard of cholesterol? So she said she has high cholesterol. Why do you have high cholesterol? I'm going to tell you. So cholesterol, this is going to blow your mind if you don't know this already, and you may. Is not fatty globule ready to cause a heart attack. And that's what they'll try to tell you because they will try to check your cholesterol and tell you that you need to block your cholesterol because it's going to cause a heart attack or a stroke. And I always tell people there's no studies in women that support improved outcomes because they don't study women and cholesterol meds because cholesterol meds can cause birth defects. And so women don't get studied because they can't really rule out pregnancy, right? So, and I will say there are over 100 million prescriptions written a year for statins. And there are only 333 million people in the US right now. So a third of the people out there have a prescription for a statin. And I'm going to tell you why this is so scary. So I know it's scary, but I eat clean and there's no heart attacks in my family. Mine is 290. Okay. So when you look at a lipid panel, there's more than just cholesterol in there. There's triglycerides, and then there's breakdowns of your good and bad cholesterol. And we'll do a whole nother talk on lipid panels and cholesterol some night. But I want to make sure I get this in. So when you look at the word, because you have to in science break down the words, very important. You see what I just did there? Sterol. What is a sterol? It's a steroid. It's a steroid. A steroid what? A steroid hormones. Hormones, steroids are hormones. We have peptides and, we have like thyroid and insulin and all that. But your female hormones are steroid hormones. Okay. So cholesterol is a precursor, and most of your cholesterol is made by your liver. It is not dietary. So yeah, you can't eat a bunch of crap. And one of the things, the triglyceride molecule in your lipid panel is actually a sugar molecule attached to a fat molecule. So we should really be looking at sugar, but nobody wants us to look at the elephant in the room. They don't want us looking at sugar, but we're focusing on hormone and we're telling people we have to lower that. You need cholesterol for your brain. You need cholesterol for your hormones. So, okay, here's the next step. So cholesterol turns into a little we've been talking about called progesterone. And progesterone, through some enzymatic conversions, turns into a hormone called estrogen. And remember, I said there's different kinds of estrogen. And then estrogen turns into testosterone. See where I'm going with this? This is nuts. So if you wipe out somebody's cholesterol, look what you're doing downstream. And the reason they start checking your cholesterol around the time when you turn 45 or 50, and they're even checking it younger now, it's like because our hormones are all whacked out these days for almost every age, is because your liver is pumping. Your liver makes most of your cholesterol. It's not dietary. Your liver's making it. Your body, your liver is making more cholesterol to make these hormones, because when these are imbalanced and your body's calling for more progesterone, you're going to start pumping out these hormones. So, hang on, sorry. Okay, something weird was going on, like this little puzzle piece, because my live is ending in 5 minutes, so I have to wrap this up. It's like, what the heck? Whenever you're trying to do those games and stuff they want you to do to verify stuff. So sorry about that. Okay, so the reason I'm really telling you this part is that there's another side pathway of cholesterol that makes a hormone called cortisol. And that's where you hear the word cortisone shot, steroid, and this is what's happening here. Okay, so, and she said triglycerides are 43 and HDL is 100. I'm going to do that here real quick just so I don't forget. What was that? Cholesterol. What was that? You have to put that back in. Triglycerides 43. Okay. So basically what happens is after menopause, when you're in ovarian failure and you're not making these hormones from your ovaries anymore, your adrenal glands still make these hormones. And so you can experience things called adrenal fatigue because your body's working so hard to make these hormones. But this is sort of like these anymore because they're like dangerous, right? But when these ovarian hormones are down and your adrenals are trying to pump more of these out and more cortisol gets made, cortisol regulates your sugar. So why did I go there with sugar? Because triglycerides means triglyceride means 3 sugars. And so sugar regulation is really super important to understand too. So anyway, I'll do all this another night, but I want you to know that all of this is corrected by correcting your hormones. Okay. So anyway, I share my story and I have white pants. So I think you know where I'm going with this. But oh yes, Mallory, please come back and we'll do cholesterol talk because there's so much more to that story. I had heavy menstrual bleeding. I had PCOS, I had endometriosis, all the things. And I'm a 19-year-old girl and went on a date and was having a nice little picnic lunch. And you can guess what happened. I'll put this red marker here so that you can guess what happened there. And so that's one of the most horrific things. And then also going to the store to buy those Super Plus tampons and being totally horrified because one of the guys that I thought was the cutest in my high school was there checking me out. So not checking me out because I was ugly and nerdy. And so, oh my gosh, it was so bad. It was so awkward. I think hormones make girls feel awkward. So anyway, my 2 most embarrassing moments. I love y'all. Please check out our Christmas special if you want to get your hormones tested. It's a test kit. We in the mail, you do this at your house, and it's $119 for this month for a Christmas special. And it's Hormone Bliss. Go to the link in bio and get your levels tested. Doesn't matter if you're 9 or 90. We can check them and tell you what's going on. And again, link in bio. And then the plan is we get on a call with one of our hormone experts and get you on, it's over here, some bioidentical creams, get this balanced out. If you're still having periods, we'll use, it's not up there anymore, but we'll use progesterone during the mid part of your cycle, fix your endometriosis. You don't need those synthetic high dose birth control pills that are going to cause problems. And so that's the plan. So if you're hitting the wall, or if you're actually not hitting the wall and you've got a doctor who doesn't understand or who's not working with you or for you, they should be working for you because you're paying them, right? Then we would love to help. And this is my love project. I've created this so we can help women all over the US. You don't have to come see me in my practice. Well, you can. I'd love that. But you can do this in the comfort of your own home, and you never have to darken the door of a doctor's office. So anyway, okay. I love you guys so much. I'm here every night at 7 o'clock. while you guys keep showing up, I'll keep showing up because we have to get this word out. We have to change the narrative. We have to change lives and we have to save lives. And this is how we do it. I love social media for this reason. And so share this. Just let everybody know, if this is helpful for you. And please follow if you would click. I love it when I see new followers after my lives as well. And inbox me if you have questions. I have so much content, so much information. I'm happy to send it to you absolutely free. So if you want content information, I'm happy to send it. And I love it. It makes me feel good when people want the information and they are awake to the information. So it'll blow your mind. I'll keep boxing. I'll keep sharing stuff with you that blows my mind. And it blows my mind because we are so held in the dark. But anyway, okay. Y'all have a beautiful night. And I love you very much. And I'll see you tomorrow.